Think about this for a second. 90 days from now, your life will either look almost the same or completely unrecognizable. And the shocking part, the choice is already being made by what you do today, before the day even ends. You see, most people think real change takes years, that you need to find yourself, move to a new city, or wait for a miracle. But the truth is far stranger. In just one season, just 90 days, you can literally rewire your brain, reshape your body, and redirect the story of your entire life. My name is Sarah, and this channel exists because my grandmother left me something more valuable than money or property. She left me a blueprint for transformation that she used to reinvent herself 7 different times throughout her 94 years on this earth. Today I'm going to share that blueprint with you, and by the end of this video, you'll understand why 90 days might be the most powerful time frame in human development. Let me tell you about Evelyn Rose Martinez, my grandmother. She was born in 1928. In a small Texas town where most people lived and died within a 20-mile radius. But Evelyn had different plans. At 23 she was a seamstress working in a factory. At 35 she became a teacher after putting herself through night school. At 42 she opened a Mexican restaurant that became legendary in 3 counties. At 58 she learned to paint watercolors and sold her art in galleries across the Southwest. At 67 she started writing poetry and won a state literary award. At 78 she became a master gardener and designed landscapes for wealthy clients. And at 85 she learned computer programming to help local businesses build websites. 7 completely different versions of herself. 7 different skill sets. 7 different identities. But here's what made her story even more remarkable. She wasn't running from her past selves. She was building on them. Each transformation took exactly 3 months of focused effort, followed by years of mastery and growth. When I asked her how she did it, she pulled out a weathered composition notebook, filled with her handwriting. "Honey," she said, "most people think they are who they were yesterday, but I decided long ago that I am who I choose to become tomorrow. And tomorrow starts every season." She had discovered what modern neuroscience now confirms, but she figured it out through pure intuition and decades of experimentation. Human beings have natural transformation cycles, and the sweet spot is right around 90 days. That notebook became my inheritance when she passed. It contained detailed observations from each of her 7 major transformations, written in real time as she was changing. Things like, Day 18, caught myself thinking like a teacher today instead of like a seamstress trying to teach. Or Day 71, customers aren't coming to eat at Evelyn's restaurant. They're coming to eat at my restaurant. The shift is complete. What she had documented was the neuroscience of identity change, decades before scientists had fancy names for it. Here's what researchers at MIT, Stanford and Harvard have discovered that would have made my grandmother nod knowingly. The human brain operates on natural transformation cycles, and they run on roughly 90-day intervals. Philippa Lally, at University College London, studied habit formation for over 2 years. What she found was revolutionary. While simple habits might stick in 21 days, complex identity changes require an average of 66 days to become automatic. And the most lasting transformations happened when people continued for the full 90 days. But here's the fascinating part. Your brain literally keeps a behavioral ledger. For the first 30 days of any new pattern, your neural networks file it under experimental behavior, temporary. Days 30 to 60 it gets reclassified as possible new pattern under evaluation. But somewhere between day 60 and 90, something profound happens at the cellular level. Your brain stops questioning the behavior and starts defending it. Neural pathways that were once effortful become highways. The behavior gets integrated into your core identity network. This is why people who quit smoking for 3 months rarely relapse long term. It's why people who exercise consistently for a full season often become lifetime fitness enthusiasts. Their brain has literally rewired to support and protect this new version of themselves. My grandmother understood this instinctively. When she decided to become an artist at 58, she didn't fight with her inner critic or try to convince herself she was creative. She simply said, "I'm going to act like an artist for 3 months and see who I become." She tracked her thoughts during this process. Day 12 still feels silly calling myself an artist. Day 34 defended my painting time when neighbor wanted to chat. Day 67 realized I've been seeing colors everywhere since I started this journey. My brain is different. By day 90, she wasn't someone who painted as a hobby. She was an artist who happened to be new to the craft. The identity shift was neurologically complete. But here's where my grandmother's approach became truly revolutionary. She didn't abandon her previous identities when she transformed, she compounded them. This created what she called layers of wisdom. When she became a teacher, she didn't stop being someone who understood fabric and texture from her seamstress years. Instead, she became a teacher who could explain complex concepts by relating them to tangible, hands-on experiences. When she opened her restaurant, she didn't abandon her teaching skill. She became a restaurateur who could train staff effectively, create learning systems for consistency, and educate customers about authentic Mexican cuisine. When she became an artist, she drew on her seamstress understanding of color and texture, her teacher's ability to break down complex skills, and her restaurateur's sense of presentation and customer experience. Each transformation didn't replace the previous one. It absorbed and elevated it. Modern psychology calls this integrative identity development, but Grandma just called it collecting pieces of yourself. She'd say, most people spend their whole lives trying to figure out who they are. I decided to figure out who I could become, one season at a time. By her 70s, she had become what she called a compound human being, someone with multiple skill sets, perspectives, and ways of creating value. She could connect with teenagers learning their first job skills because she remembered learning to sew. She could advise struggling business owners because she'd built a restaurant from nothing. She could encourage aspiring artists because she'd started painting when most people thought it was too late. This compound approach created something remarkable. She became virtually unemployable because she was so uniquely valuable. People sought her out not just for her individual skills, but for her perspective as someone who had proven that reinvention was possible at any stage of life. Grandma divided every 90-day transformation cycle into 3 distinct phases, and she swore this was the secret to making change stick where others failed. Days 130, the curiosity window. This is where most people destroy their own transformation before it starts, she wrote. They try to become perfect immediately instead of becoming curious consistently. When she decided to learn cooking at 42, she didn't quit her teaching job or enroll in culinary school. She spent the first 30 days simply paying attention to food differently. She'd visit the Mexican market and smell herbs she'd never noticed. She'd taste her morning coffee with complete attention. She'd watch her mother cook with the eye of a student rather than a dog. I spent a month falling in love with the idea of becoming someone who creates nourishment for others, she wrote. By day 30, cooking wasn't a chore I had to do. It was a mystery I wanted to solve. She called this identity courtship, the process of gently introducing yourself to a new version of who you might become. Days 31 to 60, the commitment window. This is where you separate the dreamers from the becomers, she'd tell me. Your initial enthusiasm fades, but the new neural pathways haven't solidified yet. You're in what she called the gray zone. During her cooking transformation, this was when she started getting up at 4:30 a.m. to practice making tortillas before teaching school. When her hands were raw from kneading masa and she was exhausted, she'd ask herself, am I someone who does hard things to become who I want to be, or someone who quits when it gets uncomfortable? She said the answer to that question in the gray zone determined everything about not just that transformation, but your capacity for future change. Day 45, wanted to sleep in instead of practice. Did it anyway. Realized this isn't about tortilla. This is about who I am when nobody's watching. Days 61-90, the integration window. By day 60, something neurochemical shifts. You stop thinking about the behavior and start thinking from the behavior. You're no longer someone learning to cook. You're a cook who's developing her unique style. Day 72, neighbor asked for my recipe. Realized I don't follow recipes anymore. I follow intuition. When did that happen? Grandma said this final month was about settling into your new skin and beginning to see the world through your new identity's eyes. By day 90, she wasn't just making food, she was creating experiences that brought families together. But here's what shocked me most about watching my grandmother's transformations: how quickly and dramatically her physical body would change to match her new identity. When she decided to become an artist, within 6 weeks her posture had completely transformed. She stood differently, moved her hands with more deliberate grace, even breathed more deeply. Her optometrist noticed her distance vision had improved from all the landscape observed. When she became a gardener at 78, the changes were even more dramatic. Her grip strength increased significantly, her balance improved from all the squatting and reach. Her skin took on what people called the gardener's glow from outdoor work, and the confidence that comes from nurturing growth. I thought this was unique to her until I started researching the connection between identity and physiology. Ellen Langer at Harvard ran experiments where she had elderly men live as if it were 1959 for just 1 week. They dressed, ate, and entertained themselves exactly as they had 20 years earlier. By the end of 1 week, their hearing had improved measurably, their arthritis pain decreased, they were moving with more flexibility and strength. Some even showed improvement in memory and cognitive function. 1 week of identity shift created measurable physical changes. Imagine what 90 days of consistent identity work accomplished. My grandmother documented these physical changes throughout her transformations. Day 23 of artist training. Realized I've been seeing colors more vividly. Day 56. Hands are steadier, lines are more confident. Day 81. Friend said I look younger, maybe because I feel more alive. She understood intuitively what science now proves. Your body is always listening to who you think you are and adapting accordingly. When you consistently think and act from a new identity, your physiology reorganizes to support that identity. Your body is the most honest friend you have, she'd say. It never lies about who you're really becoming. It just quietly changes to match whatever story you're consistently telling yourself. At 94, 3 months before she passed, she was still painting daily, still tending her garden, still learning new computer skills. Her doctor said her cognitive function and physical markers were comparable to someone 50. When I asked her secret, she laughed and said, I never gave my body permission to act its age, because I never gave my mind permission to think its age. Every season, I give both of them new work to do. But perhaps the most dramatic changes I witnessed during my grandmother's transformations were in her relationships and social world. Every time she reinvented herself, her entire social ecosystem would shift to when she became a teacher, she naturally gravitated toward other educators, lifelong learners, and people passionate about growth. Her dinner conversations changed from factory gossip to discussions about child development and learning theory. When she became a restaurateur, her circle expanded to include other business owners, food suppliers, community leaders and families who became regular customers. She went from someone who knew a few neighbors to someone who was connected to the economic and social heart of 3 counties. When she became an artist, her world opened to include gallery owners, other painters, art collectors, and the kind of people who think deeply about beauty and expression. This wasn't calculated networking, it was natural attraction. When you change who you are, you change what you attract, she'd explain. When you change what you attract, you change what becomes possible in your life. But here's what I found most interesting. She also lost relationships during each transformation. Some people preferred the version of her that stayed predictable and safe. They felt threatened by her growth, or abandoned by her evolution. Every transformation is also a revelation, she wrote during her artist phase. You discover who in your life loves you enough to celebrate your growth, and who only loved the limitations that made them feel better about their own. She never fought for relationships with people who wanted her to stay small. Instead, she used her energy to deepen connections with people who were excited about who she was becoming. This taught me something profound about change. It's inherently social. When you commit to growing, you give everyone around you permission to grow too. You become living proof that reinvention is possible, which either inspires people or intimidates them. I collect growth-minded people the way some folks collect antiques, she'd say. Each transformation introduces me to wonderful humans I never would have met if I'd stayed the same. Here's something nobody prepared me for about my grandmother's approach to transformation. Each reinvention created unexpected financial opportunities and long-term economic security. She never set out to make money from her changes, but each one opened doors she couldn't have planned for. Her teaching skills led to private tutoring that paid well. Her restaurant became profitable within 18 months and supported the family for decades. Her art sold consistently at galleries across the region. Her gardening expertise led to landscape consulting for wealthy clients. Her poetry was published and won prize money. Her computer skills made her invaluable to local businesses transitioning to digital. But more importantly, her reputation as someone who could master anything quickly made her incredibly valuable in unexpected ways. People sought her out not just for her specific skills, but for her ability to learn, adapt, and solve problems others couldn't. When you prove you can transform yourself, she'd tell me, people trust you to help transform their situations too. In her 60s, she became an unofficial consultant for people starting new careers or businesses. In her 70s, she helped established businesses adapt to changing markets and technology, not because she was an expert in their specific industries, but because she was an expert in the process of becoming. She charged premium rates for this consulting because her track record spoke for itself. 7 successful personal transformations, each building wealth and capability. By the time she was in her 80s, she had multiple income streams from various skills she'd developed over the decades. She was financially independent not because she'd gotten lucky with investments or inherited money, but because she'd systematically made herself more valuable every few years. Most people spend 40 years getting really good at one thing, then panic when that industry changes, she observed. I spent 40 years getting really good at things. Now I'm recession-proof, automation-proof, and age-proof. This approach to transformation as wealth building was revolutionary to me. In our rapidly changing economy, your most valuable asset isn't what you currently know, it's your proven ability to learn, adapt, and reinvent yourself quickly. Every 90-day transformation was like adding a new tool to her economic toolkit. By the end of her life, she had one of the most diverse and valuable skill sets of anyone I'd ever known, and the income streams to prove. By her 70s, Something remarkable had happened to my grandmother that goes beyond individual skills or financial success. She had developed what she called compound wisdom, insights that only come from living multiple lives within one lifetime. She could see patterns that others missed because she'd experienced transformation from so many different angles. When someone came to her struggling with a career change, she didn't just give generic advice. She could speak from the experience of changing careers herself multiple times, understanding both the internal psychological shifts and the practical external steps required. When young mothers felt trapped by their circumstances, she could relate not just as a mother but as someone who had felt trapped in various situations, and found ways to reinvent herself without abandoning her responsibility. When older adults felt like their best years were behind them, she was living proof that your most interesting chapter might still be ahead of you. Most people live one life, and call it complete, she'd reflect. But what if you lived 7 lives, 10 lives, 20 lives? How much wisdom could one person accumulate? How much could one person contribute? She kept detailed notes about the insights that came from each transformation. Things like, teaching taught me patience, but running a restaurant taught me when patience becomes enabling. Both skills were necessary for successful parenting. Or, art taught me to see beauty in unexpected places. Gardening taught me that beauty requires both vision and consistent work. Poetry taught me that beauty needs to be shared to be complete. These weren't just personal observations. They became the foundation for helping others navigate their own changes. She developed an almost supernatural ability to see potential in people that they couldn't see in themselves. The gift of multiple transformations, she wrote, is that you stop being afraid of change, and start being curious about what change might teach you. Before she passed away at 94, my grandmother spent her final months documenting what she called the legacy blueprint, her complete system for 90-day transformations, refined through 7 major reinventions. Step 1. The Identity Declaration. Don't set goals, she wrote. Goals are about doing. Identity is about becoming. Instead of I want to lose weight, declare I am becoming someone who moves their body with joy and feeds it with respect. Instead of I want to write a book, declare I am becoming a person who captures thoughts and shares stories. This isn't just semantic, it's neurological. Your brain responds differently to identity statements than to goal statements. Identity activates deeper, more permanent change pathways. Step 2. The minimum viable identity action. Pick the smallest possible daily action that reinforces your new identity. If you're becoming a writer, maybe it's one thoughtful sentence before breakfast. If you're becoming an artist, maybe it's a 5-minute sketch with your morning coffee. The action should be so small that skipping it feels silly, she wrote, but so aligned with your new identity that doing it feels significant. Step 3. The evidence collection. Keep a simple visual record of proof that you are becoming this person. She used a calendar where she'd draw a small symbol for each day she acted from her new identity, not for perfectionism, but for pattern recognition. Your brain needs evidence that change is happening, she noted. Give it proof, and it will accelerate the transformation. Step 4. The Community Declaration. Tell specific people about who you're becoming, not what you're trying to do. This creates social accountability and attracts people who can support your transformation. When you say I'm trying to get in shape, people nod politely. When you say I'm becoming someone who prioritizes physical vitality, people remember and hold you to that identity. Step 5. The Transformation Documentation. Keep notes about internal changes, not just external results. Track shifts in how you think, what you notice, how you respond to situations. The external changes are obvious, she wrote. The internal changes are profound. Document both. Step 6. The Integration Celebration. At day 90, pause and acknowledge who you've become. Write a letter from your new self to your old self. Recognize how this transformation has prepared you for the next one. Every transformation makes future transformations easier, she observed. You build transformation muscle that serves you for life. What I didn't fully appreciate until years after my grandmother's death was how her approach to transformation affected everyone in our family across multiple generations. My mother, watching her own mother reinvent herself repeatedly, never developed the limiting belief that age meant stagnation. At 65 she started her own business. At 70 she learned photography and now travels the world documenting cultural tradition. My sister, seeing this pattern of growth in the women in our family, has made career changes that her peers considered risky but that led to fulfillment and financial success she never could have imagined in her original field. Even my teenage nephew talks about who he might become next rather than feeling locked into current interests or abilities. He's already planning his first 90-day transformation for when he turns. My grandmother's blueprint didn't just change her life. It created a multi-generational culture of growth, possibility and reinvention. The greatest gift you can give your children, she once told me, isn't security or money. It's the example of a life lived with courage to keep becoming. She proved that transformation isn't just personal, it's contagious. When people see someone consistently evolving and thriving, it expands their sense of what's possible for their own life. I've now used her blueprint for my own transformations, and I see the same ripple effect happening with my friends, colleagues and now viewers of this channel. Growth breeds growth, courage breeds courage, transformation breeds transformation. Here's what I've learned from studying my grandmother's life, documenting her methods and applying them myself. Most people are living the same year 70 times and calling it a life, but you have another option. You can live 70 different. You can be dozens of different versions of yourself, each building on the last, each bringing new capabilities, new relationships, new possibilities, new forms of contribution to the world. The difference comes down to one simple choice that you make every 90 days. Do I settle deeper into who I've always been, or do I step into who I could become next? My grandmother made this choice 7 times in major ways, and dozens of times in smaller ways throughout her 9. Each time she chose growth over comfort, possibility over certainty, becoming over being. People talk about finding themselves, she'd say during one of our final conversations. But what if the point isn't to find yourself? What if the point is to create yourself, season by season, year by year, transformation by transformation? She lived this philosophy until her very last days. Even at 94, 3 months before she died, she was learning to use an iPad to digitize her artwork in post. I might not have many seasons left, she told me, but I'm going to use every one of them to become a little bit more of who I was meant to be. The question she left me with, the question I want to leave you with, is this: if you keep becoming who you're becoming right now, who will you be in 10 years? And is that someone you're excited to meet? Because here's the profound truth: you're going to live through the next 90 days whether you grow or stay the same. Time will pass, seasons will change. The only question is whether you'll use that time to become more of who you already are, or to discover who else you might be. My grandmother lived 94 years, but she lived more life in those years than most people live in multiple lifetimes. Not because she was lucky, gifted or had special advantages, but because she understood something simple: life is seasons. And every season is a chance to plant new seeds in the garden of who you're becoming. Right now, as you're watching this video, you're at the beginning of your next. They're going to pass whether you decide to transform or stay the same. The only question is, who do you want to be when they're over? Here's your grandmother's challenge, passed down through me to you. Pick one identity you've always been curious about, just one. Use the blueprint I've shared to spend the next 90 days becoming that person. But don't do it alone. In the comments below, declare who you're becoming, not what you want to achieve, who you want to become. I read every comment, and this community will hold you accountable and cheer you on. If this video changed how you think about change, share it with someone who needs permission to reinvent themselves. and subscribe because next week I'm sharing my grandmother's detailed notes about handling the obstacles and resistance that come up during transformation, including the specific strategies she used during her most difficult periods of change. Before I sign off, let me leave you with the words my grandmother wrote on the final page of that worn leather notebook. Every morning you wake up, you get to choose who you're going to be. Most people choose yesterday, but champions choose tomorrow, and tomorrow starts today. You're not stuck with who you are right now, you're simply meeting who you used to be. Who you become next is entirely, completely, beautifully up to you.